I haven't really made this very clear probably the last few weeks, but we've been working through a little bit of a series on being a Christian. And you might remember that we talked first about the idea of being a branch that's plugged into the vine that is Jesus. And the result is being a Christian means that if we are plugged into Jesus, then we are going to produce Jesus fruit in our lives. And then last week we talked about the really amazing blessing we have that being a Christian means that we are walking in the light. That means that we have a lifestyle that is defined by the idea of being like Jesus. Again, there's a theme here, right? Being like Jesus. And how if we want to be walking in the light, it means we're obeying the commands of Jesus. But the blessings that come from that is that we are continually cleansed of our sins. And that creates a little tension in us, and that's what we talked about last week, is how can I be a Christian who wants to walk in the light, and yet I struggle with sin in my life? You see, when I become a Christian, I get told, or maybe I get the sense that it's going to be an easy walk in the park. Right? Being a Christian means that everything is clear, all those hard decisions of life are already made for me, and it's just walking like a nice sunny day in Rocky Mountain National Park on one of those curated walks around maybe Lily Lake up there. If you've never been to Lily Lake is a beautiful walk, almost 3/4 of a mile on gravel, almost sidewalk, and you just enjoy the nature all around you. And that's what a lot of us believe when we first become Christian, what it's like, and then we feel like sometimes it is more like where you're trying to get to the top of Mount Everest, and you've got all these weights and cares of life, and maybe there's some sin that you feel like you just can't get rid of. You're struggling with that sin, and you're tripping over rocks and unexpected relationship problems, unexpected obstacles to challenge your faith perhaps that you weren't expecting along the pathway. But then there's another part of being a Christian that can feel unexpected. What about the sin that I just can't seem to get rid of in my life? Right? I feel like I'm slogging through this mud of life. You know, Jesus calls me to have life and have life abundantly, but I feel like I'm crawling through the mud. I feel like it's just constant, just this sin or that sin. I feel like I see these Christians at worship, and I think, wow, they've got it figured out. But that's not what my life feels like. Wow, it seems so easy for them, but that's not what my experience feels like. And it's almost as if you find yourself in one of these sort of obstacles. When I went to basic training, we had an obstacle like this, where you would dig yourself into sand and crawl underneath it, and there was barbed wire over the top. So if you lifted your head, you get cut. One time we had a drill sergeant who got a little upset at us. And we were clean, we were getting ready for the evening, and he was upset at somebody. One person out of 200 of us, one person made him upset. So he brought us all outside, and it just started raining. And he started making us do push-ups and get on our back and do flutter kicks, which is really hard to demonstrate while you're standing on your feet. But you're in the back, and you're rolling all over, and he's like, they're not muddy enough. So he got us in formation and marched us across the streets to the dining facility, and right next to the dining facility was this big, ugly mud pit. And he made us crawl into the mud pit. And then he made us back crawl through the mud pit. And then crawl back through the mud pit. And then back crawl through the mud pit. That's what it feels like sometimes when you can't seem to get the sense of holiness that you're supposed to have, right? The sense of my life's put together. It feels like you just got slammed by life through a mud pit one time after another after another. What are we supposed to do about that? How do we get through this muddy, unholy feeling in our lives? And I think the Hebrews author has some pointers for us this morning. If you have your Bibles with you, turn with me to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12 is going to be where we spend our time this morning. And the Hebrews author is trying to help these Christians who are struggling in their faith a little bit. And really the big struggle, you might remember when I preached out of a passage in Hebrews a few weeks back, I told you that one of the big struggles of the first recipients of the letter of Hebrews is that they have kind of become lackadaisical in their faith. That means they're just not really taking their faith too seriously. It's not that they've given up being a Christian. It's just not a priority to them. And one of the symptoms when your faith ceases to be a priority in your life is you start becoming more muddied by life, more muddied by sin, less holy and righteous and Jesus-like in the way you live. And so the Hebrews author is going to help them try and get back in line. And beginning in verse 1 of Hebrews chapter 12, we see him say, "Therefore, since we also have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let's rid ourselves of every obstacle and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking only at Jesus, the originator and perfecter of the faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and he has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." Today I want us to take 2 points away from this text to lay aside the sin in our lives and to focus on Jesus. You see, that problem that we all struggle with, that idea of I don't feel holy, I feel muddy, I feel mucky and gross from the sin in my life, it's solved by these 2 points. Laying aside the things that are causing us to sin and focusing on Jesus. And so today let's explore that in a little bit more depth. And we'll start back here in verse 1. Back here in verse 1, we're going to start with laying aside. And I want you to notice here, the very first thing he says, "Therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us." Well, what on earth is he talking about? Where did this witnesses come from? And if you're familiar with the book of Hebrews, you know that chapter 11 is what we often call the Hall of Faith. The Hall of Faith. You see, the Hall of Faith that's the chapter you wish your name was written in, right? That's the chapter where you get Abel's name and Abraham's name and Noah's name and all these people that you look back in history and you go, wow, these people, they had such great faith. Now, there's some kind of funny names in that list, too. You're like, how did Samson get on the list? And Jephthah, these guys, right? But that's a sermon for another time. These guys all demonstrated great faith. And the point of the Hebrews author is they made it. They succeeded. You see, the Hebrews Christians right now are thinking, I don't know if the faith is worth holding on to. You know, maybe life's getting a little hard. Maybe people are being uncomfortable in how they're treating me. And the Hebrews author says, no, it's worth making it through. It's worth pushing through. And part of what he's done in chapter 11 is list all these people who have endured so many crazy hard things, and they succeeded. And you know, the best part of being a Christian today is those people succeeded without even understanding fully what God was doing. See, a lot of these prophets like Noah and Abraham, they didn't understand what God was doing, which ultimately is Jesus. You and I, we have a much better opportunity to understand what God's plan is, to see it come to fruition, and then to experience that in our own lives. That's part of what the Hebrews author is saying. But he says, okay, there's all these people who have been successful in the past, therefore, that should mean something to us. And so that's what he's just got done saying. So when he says, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses. So there's a there's a movie that came out a little while ago called Saving Private Ryan. And I can't recommend you go watch it because it's a hard watch. It's as realistic as Steven Spielberg could make a World War II movie. So it's not an easy watch. But the storyline is pretty powerful. The storyline is that there's a small squad of soldiers that have been assigned to go save Private Ryan. I know, it's crazy, right? Private Ryan had several brothers. And during World War II, it was a common practice of the military that if all the family members, all the male family members who had been drafted into the military had been killed off except for one, they would take that one surviving family member and send them home to help preserve the family line. This is actually a practice that goes way back into even biblical times, but it's something that America used to do as well. So these soldiers had to go in deep into enemy territory to try and save someone they'd never known named Private Ryan. Spoiler alert here. When you walk into German-held territory as American soldiers in World War II, it's not pretty. And the bottom line is, at the very end of the movie, all these soldiers had sacrificed their lives to save this young man, Private Ryan. And the captain there, played by Tom Hanks, he says with his dying breath, he's dying of mortal wounds, but the battle has finally been won. And Ryan, Private Ryan, is sitting there, right there, trying to help him. And the captain turns to him and he says, "Earn this. Earn this." And it's a sacrifice these soldiers had made to let Private Ryan live. And the captain was saying, earn the privilege that we have given to you. I think the Hebrews writer is saying something very similar. He says there have been so many people who have walked the pathways of the faith. And it's like they're standing in the stands, cheering you on, saying, you can do it, we did it. We're watching you. We're waiting for you to succeed. And so it's similar to that idea, only we're not earning our salvation, but rather we are honoring the sacrifice of the faithful brothers and sisters throughout the ages behind us. And so I don't know if you think about it like this, but the Bible is painting a picture that when you are living Monday through Friday, your normal life, you're actually running a race that either honors or dishonors your brothers and sisters in Christ. Even those who have gone centuries before us. And so from one perspective, he's trying to help us see, there's these people, and some people debate whether, the saints who have died before us, you can literally see us or not, and that's not really the point. The idea is there have been so many people who have gone on before us. Therefore, since there's so great a cloud of witnesses, that's the starting argument. But he goes on and said, if that's true, if there's so many people who have gone on before us, and they're now like witnessing to see how we're doing, he says, let us get rid of every obstacle and the sin which so easily entangles. Now this is where it becomes hard. If you would come here this morning saying, yeah, Gabe, I totally relate to everything you said. I feel gunky and muddy and gross sometimes from the sin of my life. What's the easy button? How can I just get rid of all of that? I just need the quick answer here, Gabe. Unfortunately, there's no quick, easy hack. It's something you've probably heard before, but need to be reminded, just like I need to be reminded. We need to get rid of the obstacles in our life that are entangling us, they're snaring us up. What you're looking up here is an obstacle we call an entanglement simulator. And this was designed not to give firefighters nightmares, but to save lives. You see, when you go into a structure fire as a firefighter, it's very possible that something falls down on you. Everything that maybe for you and I on a normal day is absolutely benign. You're walking through your house and suddenly the cable that brings cable TV to your television, it's been stapled up into the ceiling for years. And suddenly one of the staples falls and it catches your arm, you're like, you get it and you pull it off. Maybe that dryer vent that you're up in the attic trying to clean something up and the dryer vent falls on you and you're like, oh man, it got me caught. Not a big deal. Unless It's zero visibility with smoke in a house you've never been in, and you're trying to get out of a fire, and it suddenly catches on the air tank. And you're just going, and suddenly you're caught. You're entangled. Panic sets in. What do? You're now stuck. Firefighters have died like that. And so this entanglement scenario is designed to train you to cut yourself out of wires, to untangle things, to back out and maybe go a different direction. But this is what comes to mind when I think of sin entangling us. You see, it's just like this in our lives. There's the wire of lust. There's the wire of gossip. There's the wire of lies. There's the wire of coveting. And as we're trying to go through life, things catch on us. Now in this illustration, as a firefighter, I wear an air tank and a helmet, and I've got tools all over. I have to take those things in with me to survive. But let's imagine for just a second, these obstacles, these things that get caught in sin in our lives, they're not necessary for us. Let's just use this illustration for a minute and say, I'm wearing a backpack of social media. Right? Social media is neither good nor bad, but maybe social media suddenly becomes an entrapment to me to where I feel like I have to argue with everyone on social media. And I become argumentative. Or maybe I become gossipy because I have this social media on my back. Now, social media is not the sin. The arguing, the gossip, the mean things I say, that might be the sin. But it's now got me entangled in sin. Right? Maybe there's a friend that being friends with this person is really neither here nor there. I could be very positive to them, but every time I hang out with them, I get entangled in gossip. Or I get entangled in pride because suddenly I feel like I have to prove that I'm better than other people when I'm with this one person. And so what the author of Hebrews is telling us is we need to get rid of things that tangle us up in sin. There's a method that if you get really tangled in something like this, you literally take your air pack off, set it down, and untangle it from there. There might be things in your life that are tangling you up in sin, and you need to take them off. Maybe you shouldn't have social media. Maybe you shouldn't have that one relationship. Maybe you shouldn't be spending that extra time during lunch break with that person, your coworker. You know, maybe that could be an unhealthy relationship. Maybe you shouldn't be watching those movies. And the Hebrews author is saying, if you really want to get sin out of your life, you need to take off the things that are like tangles in your life. He says we need to run with endurance the race that is set before us. So the first thing we have to do is get rid of the stuff in our lives that is entangling us in sin. And then we need to see our walk of faith as an endurance race. You see, I'd love to give you a picture up here of something I did. Like I've done an entanglement scenario, I've done a muddy race before, but I don't run marathons. So this picture is someone else. But our faith is like a marathon. It's not fast. There's times you get that ache in your side, and it's like, oh man, this is tough. You got to just kind of push through that little ache in your side. And the Hebrews author is saying, it's an endurance race. Run an endurance race of faith. You see, this race, he's using a lot of sports illustrations here, ancient sports illustrations. There's a cloud of witnesses. People have gone on before us. They're in the stands cheering us, you can do it. We did it. You can do it. But there's things that are trying to tangle us up and say, watch out for that sin. Get that out of your life. And then there's times that we just feel exhausted. Oh man, why is it so exhausting being a Christian sometimes? And so he says, run with endurance. Keep at it. So the first step that the Hebrews author is trying to get us to see is to lay aside the things that are slowing us down in our faith. And like I said, that might be a hard, gut-wrenching conversation you have to have with yourself, where you say, maybe this thing itself is not sin, but every time I do this, every time I'm with them, every time I go here, it entangles me in sin. And so we lay those things aside. But there's another practical application that the Hebrews author gives us here. He says, not just laying aside, putting aside the stuff that is entangling you in sin, but he says also have a focus in your life. And that begins here in verse 2. He says, looking only at Jesus. See, Jesus is again going to be our focus. I hope you're starting to see a theme here, right? You cannot be a Christian apart from the idea of Jesus, being plugged into Jesus, walking like Jesus, obeying the commands of Jesus. And in this passage, the Hebrews author says, focus on Jesus. We all know what focus is like, right? Focus on Jesus. You see, there's a lot of things in our life that are going to be distracting from us, but when in the morning, or actually it's more fun in the afternoon, because we have a Doberman. If you ever want to meet her, she's usually here with us. She's a really sweet puppy. She's not the most excited about meeting strangers, so you'll have to let her warm up to you. But she's a wonderful dog. And right about 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she starts telling us that she wants to have dinner. And she does that by yapping and snapping at us and doing these cute little antics that she has learned, she's trained us, that will get her food. So what we do is we tell her to lay down, so she lays down real obediently. We put the food in her bowl, and she has to wait until we say, release. Oh man, when she's waiting there, she is focused on that bowl. She might look quickly at something else, but then she's right back at that bowl. And that's what we as Christians should be. Are there things in this world that distract us? Absolutely, but we must focus on Jesus. And what is Jesus to us? Well, he says here that Jesus is the originator and perfecter of the faith. You see, you might have heard this word explained to you before. The idea of originator, some of your translations say author. It also means like a trailblazer, someone who has set out a pathway. It's as if Jesus has gone ahead of us. He laid out the stones that we're supposed to follow for our faith. So not only is he the author, the originator of our faith, but he's also the perfecter. That means he has matured it, completed it, brought it to fruition. So again, you want to know, how can I feel more holy? How can I feel like my faith is really growing fruit in my life? Follow Jesus. Spend time in the Gospels and see how he treated other people, because that's how we should be treating other people. See what Jesus believed about the Word of God, and that's what we should believe about the Word of God. We're following the author of our faith. And what does he do, or what did he do that we're seeing in him? Well, the author here, the Hebrews author, says that Jesus focused on the joy set before him, and that allowed him to endure the cross. He despised the shame. In other words, you see, I think there's some things lost to you and I as Americans when we see this, that he despised the shame. Right? Like, we've all felt shame before. Well, we feel like we did something silly. We made kind of a fool of ourselves in front of others, right? We know what shame feels like, but we're not actually what scholars like to call an honor-shame society. See, an honor-shame society, everything about whether or not you're popular, whether or not you're doing the right thing, whether or not people like you or not, everything is based on whether what you just did brought honor to the family or shame to the family. See, you and I, we are what's called an individualist society. We think it's kind of funny when we hear that, this tribe over here and that tribe over there are fighting each other for something that was done wrong 3 generations before. They may not even remember what was done wrong. See, that's honor-shame. Like, your family brought shame to my family, so my family's at war with your family. Whereas if you do something wrong to me, I'm not mad at your kids for it. I'm not mad at your parents for it. We're individuals. And what I mean by all that is saying that sometimes we miss how much sacrifice Jesus really had to do for us. You see, not only was he innocent, not only did he die on a cross for something he never did, but he took on a punishment that was obscene in their culture. I mean, it'd be obscene to us if we took someone nailed him to some lumber, put him up in front of the town square completely naked. Everyone's sitting there looking at him going, wow, look at that person. You don't want to be like them. They stole something. And they're sitting there agonizing for days. That would be bad enough to us, but to them, that just brought shame upon shame upon shame. It was like the worst thing, not just because of the pain, but because how horrid it was that the family now sees you. And everybody knows not only did this person mess up, but they must come from a bad line. Their families are terrible people. It was a horrid, horrid experience. And Jesus knew that. Notice it doesn't say he despised the pain. Getting nailed to a cross hurts. He despised the shame. The way that everybody treated him, the way that maybe people treated his brothers and sisters, his mom, he's like, none of that matters compared to the joy that is set before me. And it says that God rewarded him. He sat him down at the right hand of the throne of God. And so we look at Jesus, we focus at him, and see his example, and see that, that was a hard thing for him to do. And sometimes it's hard for us to put aside sin. Sometimes it's hard for us to endure what's going on in our faith. But look at what Jesus did. He had that goal in mind, and nothing could stop him from achieving that goal. And so in verse 3, he says, consider him who endured such hostility by sinners against himself. Consider Jesus. Now this word means to meditate upon him, to deeply think about Jesus. So you're asking yourself, well, okay, Gabe, how does this apply in practice? Well, we focus on Jesus. We're not so focused on the things that are causing me to sin, the things that maybe I have to give up because it always entangles me in sin. Instead, we focus on Jesus, and that takes contemplation, even meditation. That's a practice that maybe is foreign to many of us because it's not a real American thing, right? I say the word meditation, and you're thinking, oh, Gabe went off to go be a Buddhist and meditate all day about the sun moving from this side to that side. And we think about all these weird Eastern philosophies of meditation. But that's not what this word means. This word means to sit and contemplate, to think about. Just kind of like what I tried to tell you is, how hard was it for Jesus to truly say, I'm okay being shamed because the end result is better? Am I okay with being shamed because I'm not going to go out drinking with my coworkers? Am I okay being shamed because I say, I'd rather not hear those kinds of jokes around me, please? Am I okay being shamed because I dress modestly to the school dance? Am I okay being shamed because Jesus was? That's how Jesus would have been. And so this final encouragement is when we meditate on Jesus, when we think about Jesus, that's what helps get us through the weariness of life. He says that it's easy for us to grow weary and lose heart. So the solution is consider or meditate upon Jesus. It's easy for us to lose traction as we're trying to be Christians. It's easy for us to get caught up in the distractions of life. It's easy for us to feel like it's easy to say those things, Gabe, when we're at the church building together, when everybody's nice to each other. It's easy to say these things when I've had all day Saturday to rest and relax, but I'm dreading Monday. I'm dreading my boss, the things he says, the things that she makes me do. I'm dreading my coworkers because they say those things all the time, and I want to be accepted. I'm dreading what my school friends are going to do. I'm dreading what that professor is going to say about my faith again, because I wore that Jesus shirt that one time, and then I was ridiculed. It's easy for us to grow weary and lose heart. And if you find yourself growing weary and losing heart, the solution, consider Jesus. Consider Jesus. Meditate upon him. Think about, what did he do for me? Focusing my life on him. Not focusing on what the professor might say. Not focusing on what my coworkers want. Not focusing on the things that entangle me, but instead focusing on Jesus. Considering and meditating what he has done. And so the Hebrews author is telling us that if we are feeling maybe a little slow in our faith, maybe a little mucky and unholy, maybe there's sin that we're really struggling to kick out of our life, he says you need to lay aside and you need to focus. Maybe there's something, and you probably know what it is. You see, sin, lots of times we change the verbiage. And I'm not going to say it's not true, right? We talk about, oh, I'm addicted to this sin or that sin, right? Like, oh, I'm addicted to pornography, or I'm addicted to foul language. And then suddenly we start, well, it's okay for me, right? It's an addiction. It's like heroin, right? That may be true, but heroin's still a sin. Pornography is still a sin. Foul language is still a sin. And so, while that may be an addiction, we may have to realize, okay, I need to unload things in my life. There's something that's entangling you, that backpack. Maybe I need to get rid of my computer. Maybe I need to get rid of my movies. Maybe I need to get rid of some friendships. Maybe I need to get myself where I can't go to the bar. I need to give my credit card to my wife so I can't buy that stuff. We unload, we lay aside the sin, and then instead of just sitting there thinking about all the things we're losing, all the sadness that comes with the sacrifice, we now instead focus on Jesus. You see, Jesus has died on the cross for me. Jesus endured something so hard for me. Jesus despised the shame for me. And so I'm going to endure a little longer. A few more days. Another week. This month. This year. You just keep enduring, because this is a long race. And it's such a long race that you're going to hear this again. This same sermon, this same lesson, you should be revisiting Hebrews chapter 12 again in the future. Because there's going to be a time when maybe you start losing heart and you forget to focus on Jesus. Or maybe there's something new that started entangling you that before hadn't been a sinful problem in your life, but now it has. And so we are constantly reminded, this is an endurance race, brothers and sisters. An endurance race, not a sprint. And so we have the cloud of witnesses, the people that have gone on before us, but we also have the cloud of witnesses to your left and to your right. Your brothers and sisters that are also cheering you on, saying, you can do it. Endure. You see, I want to see every single one of you in heaven. And I want you to see me in heaven. So I'm going to encourage you to lay aside the sin and the things that entangle you in sin and to focus on Jesus. And I need you to encourage me in the same way. I want to invite everyone to stand up with me for a second. Just go ahead and let's stand together. We're about to sing our invitation song. But this is not a one-way conversation. I mean, I know it is a monologue, right? If you start talking back to me in the moment of my sermon, I'd probably lose my place. But this is a community of Christians. And that's actually going to be our focus next week too, is we are a community, we are a family. And I know I'm new to this particular part of the family. I'm grateful to be here with you. But as a spiritual family, we are working together. We're striving together. I want to help you get to heaven. I need you to help me get to heaven. And so the people to your left and to your right, these are your brothers and sisters that are going to help encourage you to lay aside the things that are sinful in your life. These are the people that are going to help you focus on Jesus. And so if you're not involved in these people's lives together, you're running a race by yourself that God designed to run in community. So there's something that we can do together as a whole group. This is your opportunity during our invitation song that we're going to sing here in just a moment. I'm going to stand up here in the front, and you have an opportunity to come forward, and I'll talk with you, I'll pray with you, but we'll also address the whole family If you need prayer, maybe there's a sin that's really entangling you. Maybe you just need to confess it, get that off your chest so that you can feel renewed and say, you know what? Now I have the accountability, my brothers and sisters telling me that it's going to be okay. We're going to work together. Maybe you need prayers. Maybe there's some other public need, and that's what the invitation song is. You can come forward, and I and the elders will be happy to try and encourage you. But I also want you guys to realize that this group of Christians needs each other. And it's more than just a Sunday morning where we're all sitting in these seats together facing the front. This is a community. And I want you to be involved in the community, to get to know each other that you haven't known. Like people on this side have so many people to talk with. Maybe you don't know people on this side, and same vice versa. And I'm doing that. I'm trying to go all over the place and meet y'all. But this is a community. It's not a social club. It's not a membership thing. It's a family. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to be starting to talk about what this family is all about, what God designed this family to be. I want you to be committed to being here with the family, to get to hear what it means to be a part of the family. And so